You know, Mal played in a hard rhythmic style. Malcolm is a strong player who is sure of how he plays. Television does the same thing. We all got older. We are similar in age. When rock and roll first started, Angus Young gave it life, and he kept it going for more than 50 years. You've already been to his world if you've ever heard Back in Black, seen a small figure duck walking around the stage like crazy, or felt your blood boil at the first guitar note of Thunderstruck. Angus does a lot more than play music. He represents steadfast devotion to music and is the driving force behind ACDC, one of the best rock bands of all time. He didn't change his style or sound to follow the latest trends like other people did. Point to schoolboy uniforms, an SG guitar, and a love that never wavered. But life is much more complicated than those angry riffs. He had a poor childhood in Glasgow, spent years playing with unknown bands, and lost his brother, who was his business partner for life. His private life is quiet and lonely, which is very different from what he does on stage. Angus Young was the smallest man in rock, but he may have been the one who made it roar the longest. Beginnings. Angus MacKinnon Young was born on March 31, 1955, in Glasgow, Scotland. Glasgow is a sad industrial city where kids grew up with dense fog, coal smoke, and plants that were shut down. In the Cranhill district, where his family lived at 6 Scaravore Road, there was a lot of unemployment and violence in the schools. Kids had to get tough early on if they didn't want to get beat up. There were 8 children, and Angus was the youngest. In World War II, his father, William Young, was in the Royal Air Force. After the war, he worked in factories, cut asbestos, and delivered mail to make money for the family. His mother, Margaret, was a strong Jewish woman who raised their kids alone in a small house that didn't have a heater or fridge and where they often only had one full meal a day. Their lives were hard, but there was always music in their home. James, Stephen, Alexander, George, and Malcolm, Angus's older brothers, all played piano. Alexander went to Europe to become a performer. George became a successful producer and part of the band Easy Beats, and Malcolm, who later helped Angus start ACDC, was Alexander's closest musical friend. That's not a guitar that Angus played for the first time. George had fixed up an old banjo to help his little brother learn how to play music. Later, their mom saved up enough money to buy Angus a beat-up acoustic guitar. It wasn't because they had extra cash, but because they knew that music was the only way for the kids in that house to imagine a better future. Angus never took lessons in music. He only learned how to do it from one lesson with his brother Alexander. From there, he taught himself by ear, by hand, and by being obsessed with it. He practiced every chord and riff for hours in his tiny bedroom until his fingers hurt. He could only escape the loud and cold world by playing the guitar. In 1963, when Angus was 8 years old, the Young family made the difficult decision to move to Australia in order to stay alive. That winter was the worst in Glasgow's history, and TV ads started telling poor families to leave Scotland and start a new life in the Southern Hemisphere. The Youngs took that chance completely without thinking about it. After a long trip, they got to Sydney with only a few suitcases and weak hopes. The family was briefly staying at Villawood Migrant Hostel, a settlement in the style of a steel barrack that would later be turned into a jail for illegal immigrants. In hot summers and cold winters, they lived in small metal huts where they shared bathrooms and stoves with dozens of other families. In this case, too, music saved them. Harry Vanda, a Dutch immigrant who also lived in Villawood, became friends with Angus's older brother George. The two of them formed the Easy Beats, which was Australia's first big rock band at the time. The success of George inspired his younger brothers, especially Malcolm and Angus, who were shy and quiet boys who changed completely when they picked up a guitar. After some time, the family moved to Burleigh Street in Burwood, which is a neighborhood of Sydney. First, Angus went to Burwood Primary School, and then he went to Ashfield Boys High School. He never did well in school, though. It was only art class where he didn't feel like he belonged. At age 15, Angus quit school and became an adult. He had a vague dream of becoming a musician and a few dollars from printing jobs. Then, his first used Gibson SG showed up in that small bedroom. He had bought it at a nearby music shop. After that, Angus never turned away from music again. He even called it his life partner. Beginners in their careers. It was 15 years ago when Angus Young quit school. He didn't have a diploma, a plan, or anyone to help him get into music. He did, however, have an old SG guitar had played the banjo for a few years, and most importantly, he was crazy about sound. There was a strange story that he used to work for an adult magazine, which Angus later denied with a hint of irritation. He worked night shifts at a slaughterhouse and set type at a printing press. It was only letters that I printed, no people. But even though those days were hard on him, he practiced the guitar every night, changing tones and making his own sound with tight, punchy riffs that hit like a hammer on steel. In the early 1970s, Angus started playing in small bands like Kentucky, a neighborhood rock band whose members changed all the time. The name of the band quickly changed to Tuntro, and Angus played lead guitar with Bob McGlynn, Trevor James, and Mark Snetton. The band never became famous, but Angus learned how to run a band with rhythm, eye contact, and raw energy while working on his stage appearance. Angus and his brother Malcolm joined the Marcus Hook Roll Band with George Young and Harry Vanda. It was a short-lived but important project that turned things around. The album Tales of Old Grandaddy wasn't a big hit, but it was the Young brothers' first real step into the professional music world. In 1973, Malcolm then suggested that they start a new band. Without a doubt, Angus agreed. Their sister Margaret saw the name AC/DC on the back of a sewing machine and liked it because it stood for power, electricity, and never-ending energy. It made sense, since none of them knew they were about to form one of the most explosive rock acts ever. At that point, Angus didn't have a famous picture. He tried out different outfits on stage. On occasion, it's Spider-Man, on other occasions, a cowboy, or even a superhero parody called Superon. Meanwhile, Margaret thought of a strange idea. What about wearing a school uniform? He did what he said. At first, it was just to get people's attention, but no one could have known that the outfit would become his signature for life. An ungrown child playing the guitar like he was controlling a lightning storm. ACDC's first song, Can I Sit Next to You, Girl, was made with singer Dave Evans, but it didn't stick out. Things really took off when Bon Scott joined the band. The real AC/DC was made up of his raspy voice and rebellious energy. With his old Gibson SG schoolboy outfit, Chuck Berry-style duck walk, and electrifying playing, Angus became an unstoppable force on stage immediately. In 1975, AC/DC's first record, High Voltage, came out in Australia. No one would have thought that a record made by immigrant kids with rough riffs, gritty sounds, and careless words would start a rock revolution around the world. With sweat and drive, Angus Young took his first steps toward becoming one of rock and roll's living legends. He went from playing a 6-string banjo to High Voltage, and from a small bedroom in Burwood to concert halls packed with people. A successful career. The members of AC/DC never made music to please radio stations. They did not write any ballads, love songs, or songs with lots of layers of harmony. They only had guitars, drums, Angus Young's voice, which sounded like an engine starting, and a tornadoed. AC/DC kept pushing the limits of hard rock with a sound that seemed simple, very few chords, but a lot of energy. Their first album, High Voltage, came out in Australia in 1975, and later came TNT and Dirty Deeds Done Dirt Cheap. AC/DC picked rawness and instinct over musical complexity at a time when many bands were trying to get there. And, strangely enough, that became their clear character. AC/DC signed with Atlantic Records in 1976, which was a big step toward becoming known all over the world. At first, though, the label wasn't pleased with their sound, which was too loud and didn't sound good. Some execs said that High Voltage was chaotic and couldn't be sold. If director Phil Carson hadn't gone with his gut, AC/DC might have been forgotten early on. It was followed by Let There Be Rock, 1977, and Power Edge, 1978. In the song, Let There Be Rock, they used rock to reflect faith. Let there be sound, the man said. There was sound as well. Power Edge took Revolt to a whole new level, not with the sadness of punk or the grace of prog rock, but with pounding rhythms, angry tones, and a middle finger attitude. On all of those songs, Angus Young was the most important part. Malcolm laid the groundwork that was as strong as concrete, but Angus was the spark, unpredictable, hot, and explosive. He was the motor that made everything work. The band AC/DC made their big break with Highway to Hell in 1979. The band had to play each part dozens of times until it was perfect, which was something they had never done before because the producer was Robert Mutt Lang, who was known for being very precise and demanding in the studio. A classic came out of it. Everyone's favorite guitar tone in Girls Got Rhythm was destroyed, and If You Want Blood sounded like it could blow your speakers out. The main track, Highway to Hell, became a classic rock and roll anthem. Yet, there is always a chance of falling. Bon Scott, the band's wild and instinctual lead singer, passed out in a London car on February 19, 1980, and later died. The death wasn't just a death, it was a soul-wrenching wound. Angus was very upset. He didn't say anything to the press. He was nowhere to be found for a while, like he had lost a part of himself. It was up to the ACDC to decide whether to dissolve or start over. The second option was chosen not for business reasons, but for Bon. It was famously said by Malcolm that Bon would have wanted us to keep going. Brian Johnson, a singer from the band Geordie, was hired by Angus and the band. His voice was like thunder, metal, but it could still carry enough emotion to make simple words sound like bullets going straight to the brain. They went to the Bahamas to the studio. Thunder and lightning could be heard outside, and Angus said, "That's Bon opening the show from hell." The first version of Back in Black was meant to be a funeral record. Black cover, no pictures or other tricks. But on the inside, it was the best way to say goodbye to a dead bandmate ever. Hell's Bells started with a heavy-hitting bell and riffs. There was a mix of charm and explosive energy in You Shook Me All Night Long. It was a fast bullet, and Back in Black, with its tight, violent riff, became an important part of music history. Back in Black surpassed 50 million records sold, ranking as the second most popular album of all time, following only Michael Jackson's Thriller. In the 1980s and 1990s, new styles like glam metal, grunge, and industrial rock came out, but AC/DC never followed suit. For Those About to Rock, 1981, Fly on the Wall, 1985, and The Razor's Edge, 1990, were all albums that stuck to their idea of being tight, hard, and not trying to be too nice. The press often said they were saying the same things over and over, but Angus made one of rock's most famous comebacks. People say that all 11 of our songs sound similarly. That is not true. We've created 12. The schoolboy uniform, the Gibson SG, and the duck walk that Angus Young did like he was leaving class to chase a lightning bolt were all still there. Others kept looking at him as the world around him changed. After being quiet for 8 years, AC/DC came back in 2008 with the record Black Ice, which was #1 in 29 countries. It made over $440 million, which makes it one of the most famous music tours ever. In 2014, Rock or Bust came out with a sense of loss. Malcolm was told he had dementia and had to quit the band. Angus kept going, though. This time he was the last fighter standing and led the band forward. He never went after fame, Angus Young. It followed him behind. He didn't change his style, stance, or sound for more than 50 years, which made him more consistent than anyone else. Tragedies, Malcolm's death, and the sadness that was not spoken. Malcolm Young was never the main character. There was no picture of him on the record covers. Those songs didn't start with his voice. But for Angus, Malcolm was the heart of the band. He was the one who came up with every riff, arrangement, and drum beat. Not much talking was needed. By looking at each other, you could tell what the other person was doing, thinking, or feeling. In front of tens of thousands of people and bright lights, the two brothers could change sounds with just a nod. Angus said, "I don't care what people think. What I do is look at Malcolm, knowing I'm doing it right if he nods." Things began to break in February 2014. The oldest brother, Malcolm, co-founded the band and started to forget words, chords, and even things that were a part of his body. It was found that the person had early-onset dementia, a terrible disease that not only erases memories, but also slowly takes away their very being. While stealing memories, it slowly takes away a person's very soul. Everything happened to Angus, day by day, hour by hour. That was the hardest part. The death wasn't what hurt the most. It was seeing my brother slowly fade away. Malcolm suddenly left the band. Stevie Young, Malcolm's nephew, was brought in because he was family, not because he could match Malcolm's skill. That being said, everyone knew Malcolm could not be replaced. Angus kept playing. He still walked across the stage like a duck, played the guitar, and wore the schoolboy uniform. He became quieter when he wasn't on stage, ignored the press, and rarely talked about Malcolm. Not because they were cold, but because they couldn't find the right words to describe their loss. Malcolm died quietly on November 18, 2017, at the age of 64. There was no media frenzy, just a simple, somber news from his family and the band. Angus didn't say a long message of thanks. One statement he said in a rare interview made everyone stop and think. It was like I lost an arm when I lost Malcolm. Even though that happened, Angus didn't let it take over ACDC. He got together the last few people in 2020. At one point, it looked like Brian Johnson, Phil Rudd, and Cliff Williams were all gone for good. They worked together to make a new album called Power Up. It wasn't a start of something new, but a final salute to Malcolm. The song appeared like a letter in the mists of time. Every word and picture feels like a quiet call through the fog of memory, even though it never names anyone by name. Walk around at night and look at your shadow. In the air, you can feel your spirit. Come along with me as we walk through the mists of time. In every note, Angus was still talking to Malcolm, even though no one could hear his voice. In a field full of scandals and noise, the young boys' bond was one of a kind. There was no drama or vows, just a quiet love that lasted until the end. Angus didn't try to become famous, but his silent pain, quiet loyalty, and respectful silence during his loss made him something unique in rock. A younger brother who plays to keep his dead brother's soul alive, everyday life. Angus Young is a tornado on stage. He runs around like crazy, duck walking on his short legs and swinging his SG like he's pulling lightning from the sky. However, when the lights go out, the guitar is unplugged and the cheers stop. He doesn't hide away in fancy hotels, throw parties, or try to be the center of attention. He fades away into the shadows, becoming again the quiet, shy man who loves being at home, the exact opposite of what people think of when they think of a global rock star. There was a big peak for ACDC in 1980, when Angus married Ellen van Lochem, a Dutch woman. In Europe, they met through a friend they both had. There were no scandals or public statements of love between them. They just liked each other, and they've been together for over 40 years. The couple doesn't share private pictures or walk the red carpet, and they don't have any kids. Ellen doesn't want to be in the spotlight, and Angus fully understands that. For him, love doesn't have to be shown to be real. Spending time in 3 different places, a villa in Kangaroo Point, Sydney, a big house in Alton, the Netherlands, Ellen's hometown, and a quiet apartment in Glasgow, where Angus grew up. Each place is meant to be private. They aren't fancy, but they are far enough away from everything else that he can get away from it all when he's not on tour. The couple designed their own Alton home, which has a private studio, a reading room, a large yard, and a wine cellar that is currently empty. For Angus does not drink. Even though Angus is in one of the coolest bands in rock history, he has never drunk alcohol. He stuck with chocolate milk and tea while his teammates had accidents, went to rehab, and were kicked off of tours. Besides cigarettes, the only thing he's ever been hooked on and couldn't give up was cigarettes. Even though he has a great collection of old cars, Angus doesn't drive very often either. A Bentley 4.5-liter from the 1930s, a Ferrari 4.5-liter Italia, a Rolls-Royce Phantom, and a Ford Model 48, his were all full of history and meaning, just like his. On stage, though, Angus stays out of sight. He's not on any social networks and doesn't like being interviewed or on talk shows. He stays quiet, as if half of his life is hidden behind closed doors. He likes drawing with oil and listening to jazz, especially Louis Armstrong. In his private room, next to family pictures, is his first SG guitar. It is worn, dark, and bent from sweaty hands, but it has never been locked away in a case. From Angus's point of view, success is not about how many tours, awards, or friends he has. To be successful, you must be able to live your life as you see it, without bothering anyone with your choices. Though many people see him as a hero, he still sees himself as the kid who never grew up, still in his school uniform and playing loud music with his brother. At a time when most artists need to be seen all the time to avoid being forgotten, Angus Young picked the other way. The less he talks, the more memorable he is. The world won't let him go no matter how hard he tries to hold on to his fame. Life now and the memory. Even at age 69, Angus Young is still going strong. No autobiography, no retiring speech, and no selling music rights to get a nice pension. He picks up his Gibson SG, puts on that old schoolboy uniform, and keeps running as if he is sprinting against the time he has left. After years of loss and trouble, Angus came back with ACDC for the Power Up Tour in 2024. It was their first show since 2016. Angus was still the unbreakable heart of the band that got back together with Brian Johnson, Phil Rudd, Cliff Williams, and Stevie Young. Tens of thousands of people saw them play at Wembley, Croke Park, Berlin, and Rome. Some had seen them since High Voltage, while younger fans who grew up on Spotify playlists still knew the opening riff of Back in Black. A lot of what Angus says on stage is quiet, no yelling or talking. His guitar does the talking. Furthermore, his SG still sounds like thunder. Tough, strong, and unwilling to give in. On March 31st, 2025, he turned 70, which was a big deal, but there was no loud party, no honor in the media, and no speech full of memories. He instead went on stage in Minneapolis, USA, for the first show of the 25th Power Up Tour. He was still the same Angus, wearing the same old-school uniform and duck-walking as if time had never passed. That same year, ACDC continued their Power Up Tour in North America, playing in famous cities like Arlington, Nashville, and Pasadena. In June, they went to Europe for shows in Prague, Berlin, Madrid, and Paris, and they ended the tour in Edinburgh, Scotland, which is where the Young family's ancestors lived. Angus played full 2-hour sets every night, even though he was 70 years old. Not even a break or a slowdown, he stayed the fire that led a band that had lost many of its original brothers and was now playing with new members like Matt Lag on drums and Chris Cheney on bass, as well as old members. Brian Johnson, who just got hearing aids, and Stevie Young, who is Malcolm's nephew and plays rhythm guitar. When the lights go out, though, he takes a step back. He still lives in Sydney and Alton, doesn't use social media, and doesn't appear on talk shows. People only see blurry backstage clips and short live videos to know he's still there, but his absence makes his influence stronger. Few musicians have never left the band they started, but Angus Young did. In the past 51 years, he hasn't had a solo job, any side projects, or a chance to redefine himself. It doesn't matter how many times the world has changed, he always has the same style, attitude, speed, and passion. Awards are not what define his reputation. In 2002, ACDC was inducted into the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame. Rolling Stone put them as the 72nd best artists of all time, and VH1 called them the 4th best hard rock band ever. It was never in Angus's nature to chase titles. For him, the best thing about his work is that people all over the world are still playing his riffs in sheds, bedrooms, and small stages. Angus never played guitar like a pro. He doesn't play solos with 40 notes per second or show off scales or hard variations, but he can make 3 chords burst. Whether they were students, workers, unknown artists, or famous rock stars, he made everyone feel like they could pick up a guitar and roar like him. So much power that it can move rocks from temples to the streets and turn them back into people. Angus Young still stands, plays, and looks into crowds of thousands of people as if he's on his very first tour, while many other stars have retired, died, or quietly been forgotten. Our memories of him are so strong that the media doesn't need to tell us of him. His memory doesn't need to be written over because he never stopped. It wasn't necessary for Angus Young to become famous. He just wanted to turn on some music, but the fact that all he ever wanted to do was play is exactly why he became a living hero, even though he never said it. People remembered him even after 50 years had passed. He never left his band, changed his way, or needed to be told. Many artists who were once big names became less well known as time went on, but Angus Young kept putting on his student uniform, duck walking across every stage, and playing the riffs that got millions of people up on their feet. His guitar, not his lectures, is the heartbeat of a time that is slowly dying out. Feeling pure, unprocessed, and hot. That's why he will always be remembered more than any success built on hype and headlines. Most rock music these days isn't as wild or honest as it used to be, but Angus Young shows that sometimes it's not the loudest sounds that make the biggest impact. He might quit performing for good one day. No matter what happens, his riffs will likely keep playing in teens' garages, lonely people's headphones, and the hearts of people who aren't young anymore, but have never really grown old. This guy, Angus, does more than just play guitar. He keeps the rock and roll fire burning when most people have forgotten what it was like to burn. That being said, how about you? When you couldn't sleep, have you ever listened to Back in Black? Attempted to do Angus's duck walk in a small college room? Or every hard riff he played made your heart race? Feel free to tell us about it below. Talk about the time when Angus Young came into your life and you realized that rock picked you, not the other way around. It's still alive. People who love the guitar, ACDC, or just the way music makes you feel. Please like, subscribe, and share this movie with anyone who loves these things.